Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. On my far right is Senator Danson Mungatana, who represents Tana River County. Good morning again. Diana Gishengo is the National Coordinator, the Institute of Social Accountability. Thank you. And Senator Moses Kajwang represents the county of Homa Bay. I begin with you, Diana, and yesterday the statement issued by the Chief Justice, and she, to quote her, said it's regrettable that the leadership of the executive and legislature in their recent public declarations have threatened to not obey court orders. These threats and declarations are extremely serious and a monumental assault to our constitution, the rule of law, and the very stability of our nation, and can slide the country and our motherland into civil chaos. This statement, in terms of its application, appears to be indicting the executive in the past 14 years since we had promulgated the new constitution of failing to adhere to the principles of good governance and constitutionalism, is it?
And rightly so, because if there is an institution that has undermined the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary, is the executive. This government, during their campaign and their prayers, they purported that they will respect the judiciary, they will actually ensure that we protect independent institutions. But when the President of the Republic decides in every public address to attack the judiciary, yet even in the constitution of the Judicial Service Commission, he has representatives. He, more than any other person, knows the avenue and has enough resources to raise any complaint against the judiciary, but outrightly says we are going to disobey court orders. It does not even end there. Parliament, the clerk of the National Assembly, sets the ball rolling and publishes notice of public participation for the housing bill against a court order.
Tomorrow, Wednesday.
Tomorrow, starting tomorrow. So clearly, the institution of Parliament is already following the presidential declaration. So we've set aside the Constitution and decided we are going to decide for ourselves what is right. And when you even think about the housing levy that is still under appeal and the decision that was at the High Court, what is this that we are doing? Now, let's go back to the Supreme Court. And what this, let's be practical and see what this meant. The Supreme Court decision on the presidential election upheld the elections of the President, William Ruto, and the Deputy President, Gachagua. At that point, they respected. They would happily do that. It is in their favor. Let's assume that the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Raila Odinga and Martha Karua, disregarded and mobilized all their voters to say we are not going to respect this decision. What becomes of this country? Think about all the land decisions that have been made. And you are awarded land, I am the one who loses, and I decide to disregard. Hire people to protect my own land, maybe even co-opt the police. What path is this that we are taking? And just because of a few decisions that were rushed in Parliament, then the judiciary that is not under direction of anyone, decides to protect the Constitution and the people, because their judicial authority comes directly from the people. And those of us who appear before those courts for constitutional matters go there because the constitutional principles are being violated by the executive and Parliament. So the president of the judiciary, the statement yesterday is spot on. And I hope that the executive will heed, and the few members of Parliament who are out there mobilizing people to disregard court orders, I think it is time we recalled them. Because every person, and by the way, even the president should be impeached for such callous behavior. How do you tell us to disregard the Constitution? What are you ruling us on anymore? It is so serious, and I'm not sure. I saw the Attorney General was there.
Yeah, he was there yesterday, yeah.
This is a principal advisor to the president. So if the president has gone wrong and won't listen to his advisor, that is also very problematic.
Okay. Let us know that we are before the public. You don't just throw as president gone wrong. What is that?
Thank you.
No.
Let's have.
Let me clarify. Let me clarify. Mine is not emotional. It is just based on the Constitution.
No, but we can't accept
when you
that
deviate.
Kind of thing. You can't accept
when you deviate from the Constitution,
use proper words. We are
and Article 10,
it will not be
and unconstitutional behavior is not allowed.
We cannot
not allowed.
Well, you are all entitled to your opinions, honorable members and Diana, but the views you express here should be done so in a manner that is objective and substantive.
Thank you.
We are doing this for the betterment of the country, and the views expressed here are not that of the Royal Media Services or Citizen TV, to be specific. Coming to you, Senator Mungatana.
Yes.
And literally, was it an indirect way of the CJ telling the executive arm of the government and Parliament, where you and Honorable Kajwang sit, the bicameral setup, that you have failed the Kenyan people in adhering to the principles of good governance?
First of all, as I understand it, and I'm a lawyer by training, okay, when somebody says, let us have a conversation about the institution of judiciary, about the fact that there are some people within the same institution that have issues, that is not condemning the entire institution, okay? That is not unconstitutional also. When the president says, let us have a conversation, that is not unconstitutional. And this conversation, we are having it because, in fact, the Chief Justice has confirmed there were 72 complaints, okay? And she stated to the Kenyan people that 3 judges left the judicial service. And they left the judiciary. 1 opted for early retirement. 2 of them went through the process, and they had to leave the judiciary. She said there are 49 complaints which are being processed, okay? And she said 13 complaints were dismissed. So we are having that conversation. What is wrong with having a conversation? In fact, we need to remind ourselves, ndugu yangu, that last year, we also had a very serious conversation about religion and religious leaders when Shakahola happened, okay? And I happen to have chaired that committee, ad hoc committee, for the time that it was alive. And it is very, very difficult to have conversation about unelected people, you know, who occupy office for life, okay? And people who wield a lot of authority, okay? And people who are feared, respected, even feared. That's why, you know, when the BBC was running that, documentary, on one of the preachers who are very famous in Nigeria, all of us were shocked, including myself. But we must have conversation, and we had that conversation, and recommendations were made. Now, the other arm that is not elected and occupies a position until retirement is the judiciary. When the president says, let us have conversation about some issues here, I think we need to understand the way this thing is being framed. And this conversation must be had. You see, unlike the executive and us who are in the National Assembly or the Senate, we always have this conversation after every 5 years. You are thrown out. You know, the people, actually, the Constitution recalls you, gives the opportunity for change. No, that's not the case for judiciary. That's not the case for other important places like the clergy, you know. And we have given them a lot of power. So when the question is put that let us have conversation about these issues, we shouldn't look at it all negative, because at the end of it, no matter how difficult it is, people start looking at questions and start asking themselves issues and start improving institutions. Yeah. You see, I like what the Chief Justice said. The Chief Justice said, let us have those complaints processed, if there are. Let us have the evidence brought, if you have any. Now, you know, a lot of Kenyans in this country didn't know that, you know, you can even take complaints against judges when they are not doing the right thing. A lot of Kenyans didn't know that. This conversation, we are having it. A lot of Kenyans also are asking whether, in fact, Parliament is obeying the court orders, whether the executive is obeying court orders. These things, this discussion would not have been brought to the fore if we are not having this conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Now, that has nothing to do with obeying or disobeying court orders. Okay. I think we are having a very healthy debate, and I think if we can moderate this debate, at the end of it, it's not all going to be wasted.
Thank you.
We are going to have a very nice definitions on what can the courts do, what can they do, what can Parliament do, what can it do, what can the executive, what can it do.
Okay.
And this is how we build a good society.
Thank you. But
that's where I see it.
Yes, yes. And given what you have said in terms of the negativities, I'll come to you, Senator Kajwang. You said healthy conversation. But to the common thinking Kenyan, it's not healthy, is it, when your colleague from the Senate, Senator Cherargei, calls court orders tissue papers and calls on the president to disregard them, and when you have lawmakers calling for the total suspension of this constitution, when you have the president, he himself, in Nyandarua County saying, PS, weka pesa tuendele na maneno, yet there is a court order to that effect of the construction of that road. I mean, how does that language from the leadership descend down to the common man, even as you talk about the healthy conversation that you have noted?
I agree. Sometimes when we are having debate, people can go overboard, you see. And some of those issues are to be looked at in that manner. You see, when an honorable member stands and says a court order is a tissue paper, I think that is not even parliamentary. That is not even correct, and we all know that. Some people go far, but if we can intellectually look at these issues and dissect them, you will see that there is a need of us to have discussion. And let me put in the point. When we were growing up practicing law, okay, the principle was you could never injunct government. You could not injunct government. Never. As life went on, and we are we're going old now, the law, the jurisprudence evolved that conservatory orders can be issued against public bodies. Now, in our time, that was not there. We could not injunct government. But now, conservatory orders can be issued. Now, the question then, you know, we should have a discussion about is how far and what are the conditions for us that should be fulfilled before a conservatory order is issued, because it has huge implications. For example, if we are building the SGR, and it is continuing, and Kenya, as a nation, we have committed billions. And then a conservatory order is issued to say, no, the construction should not go on. Now, how far can we go with some of those conservatory orders? Okay. And what are the conditions? I think this emerging jurisprudence, this is discussion that we need, because this whole issue is around what and what cannot be done. Thank you. Conservatory orders.
Okay. We'll look at
and I think when we start discussing that, we'll be getting into the real nitty-gritty.
Thank you. And the nitty-gritty details is what we are going to be getting into shortly, Honorable Mungatana. Let me bring in Senator Moses Kajwang. I mean, this has an effect of an extension, is it, in terms of its indictment on the country's political elite in having, I mean, no soft spot for the rule of law and constitutionalism in general?
Yeah, I think we need to be listening to Diana more. We need to be listening to civil society, because the mistake we make as politicians is that we want to listen to ourselves. We want to talk to ourselves, and we want to convince ourselves. These people in civil society, sometimes they bring certain dimensions and perspectives that we might not see sitting in those leather chairs in parliament or sitting in the executive. It is true that Kenya's biggest problem, the president frames it as debt. To me, it is corruption. It has been corruption. It remains corruption. Debt is just a symptom of the problem. Most of that debt is unsustainable because they were corruptly acquired, or even if they were properly acquired, they were implemented in a corrupt manner. All institutions in this country are rotten, from the executive to the legislature and to the judiciary. All these institutions are a reflection of the Kenyan society. So it will be, I think, foolhardy to say that there is one institution that is beyond reproach.
Correct.
And I think we must start from there.
Yes.
But where do you have the biggest opportunities for corruption? It is in the executive, because they're the ones who manage the 3 trillion budget that we have every year. And we know that in Kenya, corruption is driven by those with budget and those with the power of the purse. A president who is presiding over an executive and a government that is not necessarily clean in the eyes of the people, and when you listen to civil society, when we listen to Kenyans on social media platforms, because that is where now the conversation has shifted, you find Kenyans are disillusioned with the manner in which the executive is conducting itself with regards to corruption, integrity, and good governance. You've got a public that is very concerned about parliament. Parliament, the institution that Mungatana and I sit in. And it's not just about the decisions that Parliament makes. Of course, there's a big, big problem. In fact, many of the laws that Parliament passes, if they were taken to court, many of them would be shot down. I'll give you an example of amendments that we made to the Climate Change Act that was to entrench carbon trading. Yeah. And we did it in the run-up to the Africa Climate Summit. I'm the chair of the Climate Caucus in the Senate. I was quite happy about that kind of amendment. But the manner in which it was processed, first reading is done on Tuesday, second reading is done on Wednesday, and third reading and assent is done on Thursday. I mean, that's a Simon Makonde kind of bill, which if anyone was to take to court, it will be challenged on lack of public participation. Would you then blame the courts of law for that? No, you'd blame Parliament. So for the president to be pointing at the judiciary, it goes back to that biblical saying that you must first deal with the log in your eye before you start pointing out to the speck in other people's eyes. Is the judiciary clean? Perhaps not. But is this the kind of healthy conversation we need at the start of the year? You know, my friend Senator Mungatana frames it as a conversation. These are threats. This is intimidation. These are symptoms of tyranny. Because if the balance of power between the three arms of government, the executive, legislature, and the executive, that delicate balance is what constitutes rule of law, not rule by law. Why would the president extend his frustrations to the judiciary for failure of government policy? And yet the judiciary is saying, for you to introduce public policy, for you to introduce such far-reaching changes, there are certain procedural steps that you must go through. I think that is basically what the court is saying. I don't think the courts are to blame for the Kenya shilling being 160 to the dollar today. Okay. I don't think the courts are to blame for the mess in CBC. There are so many other things that the president could focus on. And unfortunately, I've in the last 1 year, I've been rather quiet because I keep saying that I've been giving this administration the benefit of doubt, thinking that after 1 year in office, they will realize that it is no longer about campaigns. It is no longer about sloganeering. It is about serving Kenyans, those who voted for them and those who did not vote for them. But you see, there's been something very consistent with this government. They've been looking for bogeymen from day one. From the day the president was being sworn in, you saw the deputy president looking for a bogeyman in the name of Uhuru Kenyatta. And it went on, the next bogeyman became Raila Odinga. And now in this year, when we thought that this government was going to sober up and look at the problems of Kenyans, they found another bogeyman in the judiciary.
Thank you.
I just want to encourage Senator Mungatana, who's an advisor to the president, that let us focus on the real issues. Senator Mungatana, the time Senator Mungatana was doing law, I think that was the 90s. We had a different jurisprudence. The president was above the law. We are in a different constitutional dispensation. We've got a population in this country that does not care about those days when the executive could get away with anything without challenge. Judicial authority that is exercised by the judiciary is exercised on behalf of the people of Kenya. And so far, I think If you are to rank the three arms of government,
yes,
judiciary, legislature, and executive, Kenyans would rank the judiciary higher than the other two.
Okay, thank you. We are due for a break briefly, and then we come back and discuss at length. Right. When we get back from the break, we'll proceed with the discussion. Senator, I'll begin with you. Come to Diana as well. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We are back with more after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.